What's up, everybody? Nick Whalen, Jeff Erickson here from RotoWire. On to week 7 already of the NFL season and, of course, the fantasy football season, giving you some sneaky ads to keep an eye on as you set your waiver claims ahead of week 7. We'll give you a couple names that maybe you're already thinking about, but try to dig deep, give you some players that maybe aren't on the general radar at each position. We'll go quarterbacks, running backs, receivers, and finish out with some tight ends. Jeff, quarterback, always very competitive when it comes to fantasy football, especially if you're trying to find a reasonable second quarterback in a super flex league. Any interest in Spencer Rattler? Any interest in Drake Maye after we saw their respective first starts in week 6?
Yeah, I'm more encouraged by Drake Maye than I am Rattler. I think second half, Rattler kind of got found out by the Bucs, and you kind of saw that the way they played. Drake Maye showed me something, not just in his throws, which especially that dime right before half to Boutte, that was nice for the touchdown, but also I like what he did with his feet too. And frankly, he's going to need that against that with that Pats offensive line. I think they had 3 new starters this past week. It's not pretty, But I also like the matchup better for Maye than Rattler this week. No offense to your Jaguars, but they go to London. They play the London game against the Jaguars. Meanwhile, Rattler's on short rest at home against the Broncos in the Sean Payton Bowl. I know they might not have Surtain. I still think I'd rather not face that Broncos defense. I'd rather face the Jaguars defense. So give me Maye over Rattler. But a little interest in both. If you have Dak, both of those guys are reasonable streams for this week.
Yeah, Chicago and the Dallas Cowboys both on bye this week, so something to keep an eye on there. I'm with you on Maye over Rattler. Just a brutal, stretch of schedule, really going 3 weeks now for the New Orleans Saints. I think you want to target that Jacksonville Jaguars secondary. I will say that. Double check, by the way, on Caleb Williams. Not a sneaky ad. We're not telling you he's sneaky, but he is still about 50% available right now in ESPN leagues. Coming out of the bye, the Bears get the Commanders, the Cardinals, the Patriots, and the Packers as their next 4 games. So some pretty appealing matchups there for Caleb Williams as he continues to gain confidence. Let's talk running backs, Jeff, and I think we got to start with Isaac Guerendo.
Yeah, he had he stepped in when we saw that Jordan Mason got hurt with the shoulder injury, and Mason was going to eat in that game against Seattle. Already was eating. Had a nice light snack, but he could have had the full meal deal had he been able to stay in the game. Guerendo is the next man up. I noticed, though, that it's not like the workhorse share that Mason was having. Instead, he shared a little bit with Patrick Taylor. Something to watch. So I wouldn't go wild with your bids. And we also don't know. They get the 3 extra days of rest. We don't know if Mason's going to be out, but Guerendo still has to be the top of your list this week without an obvious pickup this week otherwise.
Yep. I think you're right. And, decent chance that Jordan Mason could be back. They seem to have been downplaying it. And like you said, that injury occurred on Thursday. So we'll see. Patrick Taylor, by the way, was the other back who was mixing in. Guerendo did outcarry him 10-5. But, it was Guerendo that had the long run to essentially ice the game. Clearly the more explosive of the two, somebody who we had some hype around coming out of the NFL draft. I think we have to keep an eye on Sean Tucker and really the entire Tampa Bay Buccaneers backfield, which could go in any direction over these next couple of weeks. But Sean Tucker was really, really impressive after the Bucs built that lead, blew that lead, and then rebuilt that lead in the second half against New Orleans. They did not have Rachaad White on Sunday. He was dealing with a foot injury. Not sure what his status is going to look like for week 7. Does get an extra day to recover. They play Monday night against Baltimore. But both Sean Tucker and Bucky Irving were extremely effective in Rachaad White's stead. Tampa Bay piled up well over 500 yards of offense on New Orleans. It was basically a run-out script for the entire fourth quarter. Now, Bucky Irving won the snap share 49-28, but both of these guys carried the ball 14 times. Kind of a weird game script with how that game went, but how do you think this goes going forward, Jeff? I mean, when Rachaad White is back, which could be as soon as week 7, was Sean Tucker so good that it's going to be tough for Tampa Bay to keep him off the field? Or do we look at this and say, well, the Saints kind of gave up. They had injuries. The game got away from them.
I think it's closer to the latter, but I think they were making comments to the suggestion that maybe he's earned a portion of work. It might be the proverbial 3-headed monster, which nobody really wants. I think White loses out a little bit here. All season long, he hasn't gotten on track running the ball. He's still a good pass catcher. He's still a decent pass blocker. So I think that earns him some reps. But Tucker's also shown both on special teams and also running the ball against the Saints that he can flash, that he has some help, that he can help. And remember, Tucker was hyped a little bit going into last year and then just never really did anything. Never really got a whole lot of chances. I think this Bucs offensive line is better this year too.
Yeah, certainly was the case in that second half once they hit the gas and really able to kind of step on the throat with that running game. Looking at the AFC South, Jeff, both the Colts and the Texans have some backs that you're keeping an eye on.
Yeah, Dameon Pierce had the run out at the end of the game last week against the Pats. Joe Mixon is still clearly the guy, a guy. He's not just the guy, he's also a workhorse back. They used him pretty heavily, but should something happen to it again, Pierce proved to be a little capable, more so than Cam Akers. I think we can dispense with Cam Akers now. Some people were picking up Dario Ogunbowale, and I don't remember his name being called once yesterday. So that one, it's definitely Pierce is the next in line there. And the Colts, Goodson looked better than Trey Sermon for whatever it's worth. Who knows when we're going to get Jonathan Taylor back. That minor high ankle sprains, such that it's called there, such a misnomer. It's kept him out for 2 weeks now, but it's a different offense without Taylor. We've seen that, but Goodson looks like he may have a little bit more juice.
Yeah, that was certainly the case on Sunday. And, you're looking at Dario Ogunbowale, did play 18 snaps, but just 2 carries for him compared to 8 carries for Dameon Pierce on the same workload. So I think he's the number 2 now, at least for the time being in Houston. I'm looking at a couple of backs in Cleveland because Jerome Ford went out of that game against Philly in week 6 early with a hamstring injury. They're already calling him week to week. I would brace for him to miss at least one game. Deontay Foreman and Pierre Strong are the other 2 healthy backs, but we are expecting to get Nick Chubb back this week against the Cincinnati Bengals. I still think there's room for at least one more back while Chubb ramps up, and we'll see if he ever even gets to that true, workload that we've expected from him in the past. I think there's a good chance they could be a little bit more careful. With Ford out early against Philly, we saw Pierre Strong take most of the snaps at running back. However, it was Foreman who outcarried him 10-8. Both were targeted twice out of the backfield. Strong was out there a bit more in passing situations. I know the Browns offense is just gross right now. It's not a team that you want to touch in virtually anything related to sports betting or related to fantasy. But look, if you're in need of running back help this week, I would look at Deontay Foreman. And I hate to say it, Jeff, but I think that Cincinnati run defense is still very gettable.
I agree. They didn't go crazy. The Giants didn't go crazy against them on Sunday night. And in part because their Bengals defensive tackles are now healthy. That's something that didn't exist earlier in the year. So it's not easy pickings like it was earlier in the year, but it is still a gettable situation there.
I'll throw out Kimani Vidal as well, a guy who I just wildly overexposed myself to in best balls this summer. And we haven't really heard from him at all to begin the year, but coming out of the bye, that's oftentimes when you start to introduce some young players. That's exactly what the Chargers did. Gus Edwards going on IR, of course, helped that a ton. J.K. Dobbins is still clearly the guy in LA, but we saw Vidal play 19 snaps, carried 4 times, was targeted twice, caught a touchdown on a really nice wheel route. Great catch, great throw for his first NFL reception. Again, I think it makes sense, to kind of up his workload after he's gotten his feet wet coming out of the bye. And I think he has a chance to really emerge as a dangerous second option for the Chargers, who need big play threats. I mean, J.K. Dobbins has looked really good so far, but they need anything in this offense to try to rip off chunk plays. And I think Vidal is that guy. They get the Browns, the Titans, the Cincinnati Bengals coming up on their schedule. I think all those should be pretty gettable for the Chargers. So Kimani Vidal, somebody certainly to keep an eye on. And, Jaylen Wright in Miami, I would monitor it until we at least get clarity on Devaughn Achane. He was in the non-contact jersey at Monday's practice, so an indication that he still could be dealing with that concussion coming out of last week. If he's not out there against the Indianapolis Colts, I think that could be a pretty good spot for Jaylen Wright. And make sure you double check on Raheem Mostert. He's about 60% owned right now in ESPN leagues. After the Colts, by the way, to get the Arizona Cardinals, another defense that we like to target. Before we get to our sneaky ads at wide receiver, please give this video a like if you're enjoying what you're seeing, and make sure you're subscribed to the RotoWire YouTube channel. We're going to keep bringing you a ton of content every week through the rest of the NFL season. All right, sneaky ads, wide receivers. Jeff, where are you going first?
I'm going to go back to New England, just like I did with quarterbacks there. We're talking about targeting Jacksonville. DeMario Douglas has been unlocked. Even before the game against the Texans, he was starting to get a higher target share. They're starting to use him. Remember, early in the season, wasn't even targeted. Now they are using him. Caught a beautiful crossing pattern for a touchdown against the Texans last week. I like him. I like Kayshon Boutte. I even think Jalen Polk will kind of resurface after kind of a bad week, had some drops. But if we're going to buy in the quarterback as a stream, I think you need to think about buying into the receivers too. And Douglas is the first one of those.
Yeah, for sure. I think you said it, Boutte, Polk, Douglas, all of these guys have at least some appeal. They're back on the fantasy radar. That's really all we could ask for with Drake Maye. I think that was going to be the big question. We knew there would be mistakes. We knew the offensive line would be a disaster. He was pressured on like 50% of his dropbacks. That's just going to be the case for New England, especially going up against a good team like Houston. But the question was, can he at least infuse some life into this passing game? Could there be big plays? And I think he answered that pretty affirmatively. I mean, the Patriots got crushed. They lost that game by 20, but they scored more points than they had in any other game so far this season against a good defense. All these guys are under 20% rostered right now in ESPN. So kind of take your pick. You know, Douglas is a guy who led in targets. Boutte led in snaps. He had the long touchdown. You know, Polk's the guy that they have the draft investment in coming out of Washington. So it's hard to say, you know, who's going to be the guy on a week-to-week basis. But overall, you know, I think we feel much, much better about this Patriots passing game, which was just a disaster with Jacoby Brissett. And they get the best matchup in the NFL right now, Jeff. They got to go to London to do it, but they're playing the worst secondary in the league right now in Jacksonville.
Yeah, absolutely. This is all about trying to target our matchups there. So if you had to rank them, and let's throw Henry in the mix too at tight end, the pass catching options for the Pats, those three receivers and Henry, how would you rank them?
Yeah, it's tough throwing Henry in there because of the different position, obviously. I think he's back on the map as well. You know, had the big week 2 against Seattle. Had been kind of dormant since then, but got in the end zone this past week. I mean, he's going to be very touchdown dependent, as are most of these guys. I think I would go Douglas first, just because he had the target advantage. He was targeted 9 times by Drake Maye against Houston. Then Polk, then Henry, then Boutte. I don't know. The final 3 you could go in any order, but of those 4, I'm targeting Douglas first.
I agree with that. That's my take as well, and that's kind of what I was getting at. And obviously, it's, you know, position dependent unless you're just looking for a flex, but definitely Douglas first. Who else you got your eye on this week, Nick?
Bub Means. Bub Means. We're talking about a man named Bub. This is like a 1920s baseball type of name, but we got to acknowledge the opportunity now in New Orleans. I mean, like I mentioned earlier, Saints have just had a brutal schedule spot. They played at KC last Monday, short rest this past week. Now you got a Thursday night game against Denver. Not only did Chris Olave not practice on Monday and he's in concussion protocol, I don't think he's going to play. Rashid Shaheed also did not practice. He picked up a knee injury this past week against Tampa. So they could be down their top 2 receivers. I think they'll be down at least one of them. We saw Bub Means basically step into the Chris Olave role after Olave went out on the second drive of the game against Tampa Bay, took 50 snaps, ran 34 routes. He had a team high 8 targets, was just missed by Spencer Rattler on a couple of big plays. As you mentioned, Broncos could be without Pat Surtain on Thursday. I think that's huge. And Spencer Rattler, you know, I think his first start went about as expected. He's not afraid to huck the ball around for what it's worth. You know, I mean, it's good and bad. It's a little Minshew-like, but it wasn't a total disaster. He's at least willing to take shots downfield, and ultimately, that's what we're looking for. That's
so funny. I was just to say, it was much like Gardner Minshew. That was the comp I was going for, too. That's so funny. Denver, Vele is another guy I'm looking for, perhaps. You know, Josh Reynolds is on IR, has the broken finger. So that's what created the opportunity there. In Green Bay, it's a little crowded, but if Jaden Reed is out and we know that Dontavian Wicks is out, maybe Bo Melton might be someone that might interest you a little bit.
Yeah. They're saying Wicks is week to week. That typically implies at least one absence. And, you know, the non-sneaky ad here, of course, is Romeo Doubs, who's still available in about 70% of ESPN leagues. So make sure you check there. Once again, Romeo Doubs led Green Bay in snaps and routes. That's basically been the case whenever he's out there, even when they're at full strength. Bo Melton, to me, you know, he's always been somebody who's mixed in, and, you know, Packers fans have always liked him. You know, I think he's like the best 5th receiver in the NFL. Probably not somebody I'm grabbing unless Jaden Reed is out, but if he is, I think there will be opportunity there. Somebody that they've used, you know, on running plays out of the backfield as well, jet sweep type of guy, really versatile player. Obviously, I'm targeting Romeo Doubs over him, but if you can't get Doubs, if he's already snapped up in your league, I think Bo Melton does make some sense here. Packers get Houston, by the way, at home this week. So it should be a competitive back and forth game, not a game where you can just, you know, rely on the run and feel like you're going to milk this thing out in the fourth quarter.
Exactly. A little bit more competitive than this past week where they kind of put it on ice in the second half. Finally, tight end. I've got one league where I've got Jake Ferguson and Cole Kmet on bye. So I'm going to have to scramble this week. Can I go after Mo-Alie Cox, or is it going to be less Alley Cox? I think it's going to be Mo, especially if Joe Flacco's at quarterback again.
Yeah, the problem is I don't know if it's going to be Flacco, right? It's like it felt like Richardson was going to play in week 6, and then they kind of pulled the rug out from under us a couple hours before game time. Like it feels like this is the week Richardson is back, and I basically downgrade everybody in that offense with Richardson there, which is a little counterintuitive when we're talking about the starting quarterback coming back, but it's a totally different offense, right? And,
Right.
We know what the situation is at tight end. You're never going to feel great about any of these ads, but I think I would look at Grant Calcaterra first, especially if Dallas Goedert is ruled out. He went out early in that game against Cleveland, dealing with a hamstring. Calcaterra did have one long play that accounted for most of his production, but was targeted 4 times on kind of a just disjointed overall day for that Eagles offense. So if you're looking for somebody with opportunity, I think he's there. And then we mentioned Hunter Henry. You got to bump him up, right? If we're just kind of giving an overall upgrade to this Patriots offense, I think he has to be included in that. 5 targets, most since week 2, went for 41 yards and a touchdown last week. He's going to be very touchdown dependent. But again, we love the matchup against the Jacksonville Jaguars. I mean, this might be the best spot the rest of the year for the Patriots offense.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Cole Kmet just tore up this Jaguars defense. So maybe it is they're especially weak at tight end. I mean, in covering the tight end. One of them was a little trick play that they just kind of bit hook, line, and sinker on. But, I don't know if that will happen again.
Yeah.
But still.
Yeah, that's kind of what you have to resort to if you're the New England Patriots. On the way out, I'll double down on your Devaughn Vele suggestion. I really like him a lot. It kind of fallen out of favor, had the rib injury after looking really good in week 1. And now with Reynolds on IR, he's had more opportunity, kind of competing with Troy Franklin for that wide receiver 2 spot behind Sutton. He was targeted 5 times on Sunday, caught 4 of them for 78 yards. Just a really tough player, a guy who makes tough catches. He's willing to go up into traffic. And look, the Las Vegas Raiders, man, they're a disaster. But Tre Tucker was far and away the leader in snaps, in routes for the Raiders in week 6 without Jacoby Myers. I don't think Devontae Adams is ever playing again for the Raiders. Tucker was only targeted once. I know it's kind of ugly, but no one really saw significant targets in that offense outside of Brock Bowers. So this is one where if you're in a deeper league, if you're really hard up for help at receiver, I'm just going to kind of put my faith in the snap and the route count for Tucker as opposed to the actual production.
Yeah, I can see the logic behind doing that there. It's just have Aiden O'Connell throwing it to you. That's the thing that bothers me so much. And just the Raiders just doing Raider things. But yeah, he's definitely the guy that I think that has the best opportunity, especially if Myers is out long term.
Yeah, that's the thing. I think Myers basically has to be out for that to be justifiable. But nevertheless, we try to hit every NFL team. We don't discriminate here on the sneaky ads. That's going to do it for NFL Week 7 sneaky ads. Let us know in the comments if we missed anybody. Who are you targeting in your leagues at quarterback, running back, receiver, or tight end? We'll keep bringing you these videos every week throughout the NFL season. Make sure you are subscribed, please, to the RotoWire YouTube channel. We're going to be bringing you a ton of content there as well. You can find all of our podcasts live and archived on YouTube. And if you want to check out our site, RotoWire.com, just go to RotoWire.com/try. Free access to everything, all of our content, all of our tools, all of our rankings. You can check out the RotoWire Picks page as well and the RotoWire Picks app. Just go to RotoWire.com/try.